Hello and welcome back to the Untriggered Parenting Podcast with me, Paula Sampson Lawrence. This week is part 1 of our Empowered Conversation series. Each week I'll have a different guest on to discuss all things parenting and motherhood. And this week we are kicking off with Dr Priscilla Lacroix, a pediatrician and fellow parent coach from Omaha, Nebraska. Priscilla and I actually trained as parent coaches together with the Jai Institute of Parenting. I talked to Priscilla about how she went from being brought up in a very traditional and authoritarian household to making the shift into a more conscious and connected parenting style with her daughter. I am excited to share our conversation with you, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. Welcome, Priscilla, to the podcast today. Priscilla and I did our certification together, and I think that we had a nice sort of connection, a nice little bond. So when I was thinking about doing the podcast, I was like, I have to get her on. And so I'm so happy she's here. So Priscilla would like to sort of give yourself a little introduction and tell people all about what you do.
Yes, Paula. Well, I am so glad that I get to see you again, too. I am a pediatrician and also part of the Jai program. So another certified parent coach from the same class, and also mom of Isa. I have a 2.5-year-old and another child of immigrants, mama who's reclaiming her parent journey.
Amen to that. So the main reason I wanted to speak to you was because I know that you were brought up in a very kind of authoritarian, traditional, parenting style. So if you could just kind of talk about what growing up was like for you.
Yes. So that was one of the biggest things that I remember connecting with you on is we had this child of immigrant upbringing. And personally, in my story, my parents were very strict. So I feel like the big picture mindset was a child is seen but not heard. So some of those patterns that I grew up with, especially when it came to discipline, were punitive, both verbally and physically, and a lot of shame training. And it's pretty incredible that when I became a mother, despite all the information that I knew as a pediatrician about raising healthy children and how to nurture them, I found myself struggling at home in the parent journey. And what I noticed was I was repeating these patterns that weren't helpful for me growing up, and that caused a lot of shame in my own story. And I just felt agitated and frustrated with myself. And I want to change, but I don't know how.
At what point? Because I think that we don't know anything different than what you're surrounded with. But at what point did you feel, I don't know if this is something I want to do when I become a mum? What do you remember there being some sort of pivotal point, or was it just growing up knowing there's no way I'm going to parent this way? Or was it more as you start thinking about having a family of your own?
So what happened was throughout my training, I learned new information about how, like, raising children and healthy children. And so I knew that knowledge. For example, I grew up being like physically disciplined a lot. And so in training, I realized, oh, that's not helpful. Like, we want to try to avoid that because it increases anxiety. It increases their likelihood to repeat those type of violent behaviors into adulthood. So I had this wanting to do it differently and believing that I would do it differently when I had my own. And then what I found when I actually had my daughter, and when we were hitting into toddlerhood, I found myself like, whoa, this feels intense. And I found myself like, I don't want to hit her yet. Boy, do I feel like it. And then, but then also I would try different things. So timeouts, which is a common thing that we're taught in pediatrics, like doing a timeout. And I noticed that in those timeout moments, when she was separated from me, disconnected from me, she was even more upset. And it didn't really teach whatever I was trying to do. It made both of us feel more overwhelmed and more frustrated. So that showed me, okay, this isn't working. And at certain points, I felt like I was just yelling too much and
Yeah.
too often. And even in that information of my training is even yelling a lot, is harmful to our well-being of our kids as they grow into adulthood. But I felt helpless. Like I
Hmm.
don't know anything else because it was what I defaulted into,
Yeah.
and the tools that I had were so limited. So it was kind of both, like wanting to be different, but then the way once you became a parent, how vulnerable you
Hmm.
actually are to your default patterns.
And do you feel that in terms of who you had around you, was there anybody that kind of felt the same way about parenting that you did, that you could sort of bounce ideas off, or did you find that you were sort of isolated in how you wanted to kind of go forward in sort of a more conscious, gentle parenting sort of paradigm?
Yeah, I felt isolated in my like direct community. It was
Hmm.
something that parenting is so hard to even talk about, especially our parent struggles. It felt isolating, especially as a pediatrician. I felt like, oh, I'm supposed to know this and do this, but I'm struggling in it. And I added even more to the shame that I felt. But where I felt community was online and
Hmm.
finding spaces like Big Little Feelings on
Hmm.
Instagram, or learning more about natural logical consequences, which for me was my doorway into being curious about parent coaching.
Hmm.
Was seeing a video about logical consequences. A good example is a child spills the milk. You don't put them in timeout.
Hmm.
You don't yell at them. You just, okay, the milk is spilled. Let's clean it together. That makes sense. That logical consequence for me, I remember when I watched that video, I was like, this feels so relieving. It feels right. How can I
Hmm.
learn more? And so that online community of other parents who want to do it differently, but don't know how and want support,
Hmm.
that led me ultimately onto this path of finding more parents like yourself
Hmm.
who want more tools, who want more support to parent the way their heart wants to.
Yeah. And do you feel though that in real life, so when you're surrounded by your family and, your parents maybe, and when you have to discipline or parent in front of them, has there been any moments that have kind of made you, because we all freeze, don't we, sometimes when we're parenting, when other people are watching, because we feel that judgment anyway. Because
Mhm.
as a society, if your child is on the floor having a tantrum, everyone's like, sort the child out ASAP, and you feel that pressure to stop the crying, to stop the tantrum, to stop whatever it is, and to stop everybody looking at you or thinking that you're a bad mother. you
Mhm.
know so has there been sort of situations where something has happened with your daughter in the presence of your family members and you felt a sort of pressure to deal with it how they would approve of?
Absolutely. Definitely before the whole coaching journey, there was a huge pressure and almost that heavy pressure where I couldn't even focus on my relationship with my daughter in the
Yes.
moment and what we both
Hmm.
needed to make it through this big feeling moment. I
Hmm.
The thought that would always run through my head was, what are they thinking?
Hmm.
Or am I doing it right? I just felt had so much self-doubt, so much anxiety about this little tantrum that I couldn't even really show up in that moment. And
Yeah.
a great little example with family gatherings is when she would throw, like they're tired, they need a nap, but they don't get to have that during these holiday moments, and then they're having a meltdown. Fortunately, in my family, they didn't have this like interject, let's do it this way. They were very respectful in the sense that my parents, even though we all grew up with some type of spanking or some type of timeout, they would not impose themselves in
Hmm.
front of the active situation going on. But so I appreciate that they gave that space and grace for us to do
Yeah.
that. And for me, what I've have found most helpful is when we do have those struggles, we just go take space together. Let's go, let's go. We need to wind down, we need to decrease this environment and make it a little quieter.
Yeah.
And I having that simple tool to be able to do that makes a difference because we can go to a room,
Yeah.
we can both find our calm, and we can be with each other. I don't have to go send her to a room by herself. I don't have to do any of that. We can actually stay connected as we hold space for another.
Mm-hmm. And then do your parents, for example, have you had a conversation about the fact that you are parenting differently to how they parented you? Or is it one of those things where you're just sort of forging your own path and it's not a sit down and discuss it type of thing, but you'll both just know that what you're doing is separate?
So my parents have just been curious, and I'm grateful for that, because they've been curious and not imposing their beliefs of child rearing with me. They've actually been curious because they've seen the way Isabel listens to what I say with calm communication. I don't have to yell at her. They notice that, like, oh, how did you get her to do that without yelling? Or I don't have to spank her, which is what my parents had to do often with us. So they're more like, wow, what are you doing? I'm curious. Tell us more. How are you able to do that with
That's
her?
so
And
good.
she's
Yeah.
only a toddler.
Yeah.
And so that has been an opening path for my family to just talk about that. You don't have to use some sort of disconnecting behavior to meet a need with your child.
Yeah. That
But
is
it's
really,
something
really
that
good.
it's something that I didn't even notice until I got comments from my family, or even my
Yeah.
husband. He was like, how did you get her to do that?
Yeah. And how is he? Is he on board with it, or does he just sort of so is he following your path? Is he fully on board with the whole thing? Or is it just, do you parent differently and you both accept the differences?
Yeah. So when I went through this journey, I just focused on my self growth.
Yeah.
So I had to begin with that tunnel vision with myself and not worry about what he's doing or what other people are doing. And the interesting thing about that is the more that I grew, the more skills and tools that I learned, he noticed that within, like, almost a ripple effect within our family. And a great example is the way I would use sensory words to describe what's going on. He started picking up on that. So it's almost like you kind of become a magnet, and they learn it too.
Yeah.
So he has appreciated the way it's deepened connections with everyone, not just my daughter, which was the intention, but with even our relationship, the way we communicate with one another, and how something as simple as using like sensory language, like, I hear you saying this, without judgment, without shame, how that can kind of open a doorway for connection and
Yeah.
a willingness to hear and also communicate.
I think I have to say that's probably one of the most transformative things I think about this course is that we both went in it to help us as parents, but there's so much that can be used for all your relationships. I don't know if you remember the module about empowered conversations, and that could be used in the workplace, with your boss or your employees, or it's such a powerful thing. And it's just so great to hear that you've used that in, dealing with your husband, and how that has transformed that relationship as well. And I think that's a part of it's like a bonus, isn't it, from the course, where it's more kind of holistic, not just parent and child, it's just relationships overall.
It's a surprising side effect.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to describe it, because
Yeah.
that type of communication, which is nonviolent communication, and that book that we went through by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, that is the one book that if anyone could take anything out of, is learn that book.
Yeah.
As it's something that you learn to integrate with how you talk to yourself, which I remember after reading those first 2 chapters, I was like, I have been violently communicating all my life.
I know, right?
And I was just going into the book, I was like, not violent communication, what's this? But I was like, whoa, I'm violent. Like, and you don't realize it, how a judgment can be not compassionate, how a label is not compassionate, and how it actually starts off a communication with disconnection, and you don't realize it until you learn more about it. So I'm grateful for that resource.
And I think that one of the great things about the course as well is just how to be so intentional with your parenting. And I think we talked about this earlier, how I find it kind of exhausting when you're intentional because you've got to be it's that always being curious and it's easy to kind of go back to losing your temper or just shutting things down, but it takes a lot of intention and energy to make the decision that you're going to be curious about what the other person is saying, feeling, what's going on underneath, because they always say all behavior is communication, isn't it? So is that whole thing of when something is happening, what is really going on underneath that? So for me, that was really transformational as well. I don't know how you felt about, because I think that a lot of like even I said at the beginning, oh, when your child is having a tantrum, but the truth is that child just has an unmet need, you know. And so how do you sort of use that in your everyday parenting, the whole looking beneath the behaviors? Because for me, that's such a big, big thing.
I feel you. Like I remember having such a big learning curve with that
Mm-hmm.
because it was just so opposite of the way so many of us grow up and opposite of what many of us learn with the
Mm-hmm.
like the more common parenting resources out there. And giving my child the grace to look underneath her behavior ended up being a way to connect with our common ground and our humanity. Like beneath our behaviors, our feelings and needs and unmet needs. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the same that is true for a 2-year-old. And for me, a mama in her
Yeah.
early 30s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was eye opening. Like I agree. I feel like intentional parenting is it's an active choice.
Mm-hmm.
You choose to be an active participant every day. But I
Mm-hmm.
also felt like that brought me more into a more present parenting with presence. Because I
Yeah.
had to really like not be distracted, put my phone down, not multitask, and really meet the
Mm-hmm.
child that's in front of me.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's that whole thing of seeing the child as an individual as well, not just, well, because we can do this, for example, with toddlers. We could say terrible twos, they're going to act irrationally, which, yes, we know that's kind of true. Let's not pretend it isn't. But it's going, looking at your child as an individual, what their specific needs and wants are, and not treating them as, a number or a set of behaviors that, you've read in some book that 2-year-olds exhibit or 3-year-olds exhibit, and giving your child what they need, which might be different to what another child of the same age, might need or not. Do you think that's sort of the same with how you approach your little one?
Absolutely. It's by focusing on the feelings and needs, even though it's what connects us with our common humanity, when you tailor it to your unique child,
Mm-hmm.
it it helps you let go of the scripts, let go of the generic advice you get, and focus on what can we do right now together to help you and to help me get through this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I find what was liberating is that oftentimes it wasn't trying to fix her, trying to stomp out the tantrum, or trying to match her energy and yell back. It was
Yeah.
actually just being calm. Like how, let's lean into this need to just pause.
Mm-hmm.
Let's turn off the stimulation. Let's slow down. Let's sit here. So I found that really fascinating because it works and you have to let it work and be patient.
Yeah, you do.
Notice it to notice it.
Yes. And the other thing I thought was super important, because when we started with Jai, the main thing they kept telling us was that this is parent-centric coaching, which means, when you are being coached, you are being coached. You're not being coached to go and then fix your child because your child isn't broken. You're not broken. You just need tools in order to be able to deal with whatever situation is happening at that time. And I think that that's the most important thing. It's dealing with yourself, which is why I called this podcast Untriggered Parenting, because a lot of the times there are certain behaviors that your child might exhibit that triggers you, and that's not your child's fault,
Mm-hmm.
nor is it their problem. It is our problem, it's my problem to figure out what that trigger is and what's underneath. Then again, looking underneath the behavior. Why does that bother me so much? What is it
Mm-hmm.
trying to tell me? You got to look at yourself first of all, because we all know that children will model you. They do what you do, not what you say, which is great, but also super scary. I think you'll agree,
Yes.
because we think we can fake our way through it sometimes, but children pick up on our energy. They pick up on our
They see
mum is
right through it.
yeah, they do. I'm trying to stay calm in this moment, but I'm not calm. I'm inside. It's like a raging storm, and they know that, and they can feel
Mm-hmm.
that. So instead of trying to cover it up, you got to be real and say, no, I'm not happy right now. I
Yeah.
need to, but figure out why you're not happy, because that's not your child's job. Because
Yes.
I don't know whether you have experienced that, where you said to yourself, if only she would stop doing this, then I wouldn't be so upset.
That's
you
how I
know
came into this. And
hmm
but at the same time, like I was so curious about parent centric, like focusing on me. And it was just once again so different when I feel like most of the things out there are focusing on our children, managing them. And this was just for me, it felt refreshing how I can focus on myself and understand my triggers, and that can be a
hmm
path to helping my kid.
yeah
So that is what I found so fascinating in this, and
hmm
how when as you're unpacking those triggers, your story matters. Like the way you grew up matters.
yeah
And it actually is your guide to helping you let go and open your heart to new skills to bring into your family.
Yeah, because I think again, I have so many biggest takeaways from when we were training. The other thing is a story that we tell ourselves, because
Yes.
sometimes we don't even know that we've written this whole novel about what things are, what they mean, what they should be, what they shouldn't be. So when we come up against these scenarios in our parenting, we've already decided what it means. So and then we kind of foresee the future. We start going, okay, if I let my child do this, they're going to turn into this, that in the future, they're going to be this. And we don't know any of that. We've just
Mhm.
literally made that up. But what it means is we parent from a place of fear, you know, and which is the worst place that you can do anything from, isn't it? Because you're parenting from anxiety, you're not present, are you? You're in the future somewhere thinking this is going to happen, and
Or stuck in the
all,
past that, oh, they're going
yes,
to repeat my
the
mistake.
repeat exactly. And I thought what you said earlier was really powerful about staying present. That's like the number one thing. You've got to be here now, because if you're not present, and who knows where you could be and where you could happen. So, what are some of the ways that you make sure that you are present? How do you, make that a priority?
There are a few things that I do. And the first one being, especially when we're going into a high intensity situation like a tantrum, is
Mm-hmm.
I really do have to spend most of the time checking in with myself. Like,
Yeah.
how am I feeling? And what I do is I own my feelings, and like I feel frustrated right now. Mommy's got to get to work, and I need your help. And when she's having such a hard time where I can't even communicate that, just honoring right now she needs space.
Mm-hmm.
Pushing her along isn't going to help her right now. And so then I give her a few minutes, because it can feel like forever in the moment, but in the big picture it's like only a minute or two where they've got to just really be with their own selves before
Yeah.
we can connect together and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I just quickly wanted to backtrack a little bit, going back to, your upbringing and your parents. Were you able to come to a place of compassion for them and how they parented? Because obviously we only know what we know at the time, Was it Maya Angelou that says, once you know better, then you do better, but until then, you just do what you know, don't you? So how did you kind of reconcile that? They might not have given you what you needed, but they only gave you what they knew to give you.
mhm. I've definitely coming into the program, I did carry so much resentment
Mm,
towards my parents. And interestingly, the practice that I loved, that I found so healing, was writing the letter to our parents.
Yeah.
When we learned that they only, and creating your coherent narrative, which they only had the certain skills that they grew up with, and how we all are kind of carrying these generational patterns. We
Mm.
don't even know it. We just absorb it.
Hmm.
And once I found myself repeating similar patterns, or even very tempted to repeat that, it just gave me a lot more compassion and saying, wow, parenting is so hard.
Yeah.
And my mom had to do that as a new person in a new country, learning a new language, trying to meet basic needs.
Hmm.
And she did her best. She truly did her best. And I remember writing that letter and unpacking all of that. And I felt this kind of release, like I could let go and I could see her for the human,
Mm.
the human that is just trying their best. Because I feel like with parenting, especially motherhood, it's so easy to get lost in the role. And I was
Yeah.
lost in there too. And to be willing to not only look underneath our children's behaviors, but even our own
Hmm.
and that of the people that we love. And that practice itself gave me such a healing process, to where after leaving it, like, I have so much more compassion for her, and love,
Yeah.
the love that I really was so clouded by that resentment that I carried all throughout my adult
Yeah.
life.
Hmm. And have you found also that you can find compassion for yourself for, you know, again, how we were brought up is not our fault. We
Mhm,
don't have any control over that. So when you might find yourself, sliding back into a pattern that's just part of your makeup, I
mhm.
suppose, that you have to sort of be intentional about not repeating. Do you find compassion for yourself in those times when it's so easily to slide back into those patterns?
In the beginning, I feel like it's so hard to. It was easier to extend compassion for others than my own self.
Yeah.
But I really couldn't break through and really understand what compassion really means without starting with myself. And
Hmm.
that took a lot of work, and it still is. And one thing that helps give me permission to practice more compassion is honoring the process. That
Yeah.
even through all of the things that I've gained through the coaching experience, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And actually having that mindset of, how can I grow?
Hmm.
That's been one of the most liberating things in my parent journey, is with every challenge, okay, how am I going to grow? How am
Yeah.
I going to grow with my daughter? How are Issa and I both going to grow?
Yeah. And I think compassion is so important because we can't give others what we don't give ourselves. So how do we
Mhm.
show our children compassion and empathy and grace and patience and all those things that they need from us if we withhold that from ourselves? We have to start giving it to ourselves. Otherwise, we won't see, we won't give it to our children. Because I think my why was I had a lot of compassion for children because I felt that it's life can be quite hard for a kid. And
Yes.
especially when you're a kid who's not allowed to say how they feel, express their emotions, sit down when you want to run around, eat when you don't want to eat,
Mhm.
and just being given orders all day long. I would want to act out sometimes too, you know,
Mhm. Yeah, it
and
makes
have,
and adults do, right?
yeah, we
Kids
do,
see
right?
adult tantrums all the time.
Mm.
Why can't kid
Absolutely.
yeah, why can't kids give me
Exactly.
grace?
And that's one thing I said, do I give my children you know constraints and restraints that I don't give to myself? And if
Mhm.
that's not really fair, is it?
Yeah.
So, and I think having compassion for children is a big one because they're learning, they're still growing, they're in the thick of it all the time, and they need somebody who's steady to lead them. And we have to be that steady leader. And that does start with compassion and empathy for yourself and, for your child.
So it sounds like your why was that compassion towards children. Like, how did you navigate building compassion for yourself?
Um, I think the first thing I did was I decided that I really wanted to do the best that I could for these children who have been gifted to me, because I see them as such a blessing and it's a gift. And I owed it to them to give them the very best of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I said before, I'm a Christian, I believe in God, and I believe in a God who's compassionate and empathetic and gives us so much grace. And I'm supposed to be in his image. And that's what I have to show to my children. If I'm always irritated with them, if they get on my nerves, if I don't want to see them, I don't want to speak to them, that's not showing them love, is it? And don't get me wrong, we all have those moments, don't we? When we're like, I love you, but leave me alone for 5 minutes. I think you're great and awesome, but go to bed now. That's all, that is normal. But I'm talking on a general scale. We have to give their children, they've been on this earth a lot less time than we have. We should give them some grace. We give ourselves grace sometimes. Sometimes we don't feel like getting up and doing the thing that we need to do, and sometimes they need guidance to do that. And it's okay to teach them and to disciple them without harsh punishment. If they can't be surrounded by love in their home, where can they find that kind of love from?
I
Do you
love
know what I
that.
mean?
It's so true. I connect with that as well, that outside of our home, there are so many challenges, so many uncertainties. Can I provide that safe, brave space in our home where we all connect and that we can nurture and grow with compassion? I love that. I
Yeah.
love to share.
And I think, one of the criticisms about gentle parenting, which I don't want to go on a rant, but I really hate the term gentle parenting, because I think people think that you speak to your child in a little soft voice and
I
you
think
ask them to
gentle
do
is so
things. Oh,
distracting. I actually prefer
yes,
connected. I prefer connected
I
parenting
like
because
connected.
that's the beauty is, can I maintain connection
Yes.
even when we're in a hard moment, even when we're working on discipline? And discipline, the Latin origin is to learn.
It's to learn, to
I
teach,
maintain
to decide.
connection.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. Can I maintain connection while I'm helping her learn? And
hmm
when I focus on that intention of being a connected parent, that helps me have that tunnel vision, because it's
hmm
in those small moments of when we're going through something hard, can we be connected? That
Yes.
becomes that message into adulthood, that when they struggle, when they fail, when they make a mistake, they are still worthy of connection.
Yes, absolutely. Because I love conscious, respectful parenting is good too. I like conscious parenting only because you should be conscious of what's going on in every situation. What's going on in your body? Are you feeling stressed or tense? I tell my kids, what's going on right now in your body? Because you just lashed out or snapped or whatever. But let's go beneath again. Be conscious and curious what is happening. And I think because that's the main thing, like again, connection, maintaining that connection with them. It's so true. But I think, like you said, gentle is so distracting because
I think
I
it is,
think
and
it
I love
is.
that you're being that we get to be honest about that. That I agree. It's such a distracting word. I'm not a fan of that term. And also, another big thing with parenting and just being human, we don't need another label.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? Like
so
another
true.
label to fit into. And versus these are all these resources. I think connection leans into the value, the core value that
hmm
I carry. And that is why I'm attracted to that term. Like connected makes sense. Connection is a value. And the art of maintaining connection, even in
hmm
difficult times, that is the art of being human.
Yes, and that's the connection is everything. I think
Yeah.
it really is everything. But I wanted to quickly talk about I've been seeing a lot of, if you look in sort of the gentle parenting, conscious parenting space, if you look at the comments section, which is always a little bit of a cesspool sometimes, but you will always see things like oh, you're not preparing your children for the real world. You're setting them up to think everyone's going to be nice and polite and gentle with them when the world isn't like that. And and what do you think about that? Because like we just said, home should be a place filled with love where you can be yourself, where you can have compassion and be connected to your caregivers, you know. But how does that mean we're not we're not preparing them for the real world?
When I read those
What do you feel about
comments,
that?
yeah, when I read those comments, I feel sad in the sense that we are so many people are so disconnected
Hmm.
that they carry the belief that they have to repeat those disconnected behaviors.
Yeah.
That there's an unwillingness to even see the young human in front of you.
Hmm.
And so I feel sad, but then I sink into the very truth that we can't control anything outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can't control external circumstances. We can't control our spouses, and we can't control our children.
Hmm.
All I can do is control myself. And my choice is to practice compassion. And I get to see what it looks like to nurture a human with compassion.
Yeah.
That's what I'm curious about. I grew up with the opposite of that. I grew up
Hmm.
punitive, shame trained, physically disciplined, and it created a very wounded person, and
Yeah.
I am in that healing journey. But it
Yeah.
has taken me almost 3 decades to finally, and it took me motherhood specifically to break
Hmm.
me down and allow me to rebuild myself back up.
Yeah. And you saying that just reminded me of a quote that I can't quite remember the words to. Something about it's easier to raise a whole child or something than to fix a broken adult. I'm sure I've just messed that up, but I think you might have, maybe you've seen that quote too somewhere. And that just sums it up for me, where let's do the work now while they're young, because we don't want to then leave them the job of undoing things when they're grown up, you know. And just going quickly back to that whole thing of not preparing them for the world, I think we are preparing them for the world.
Mhm.
We're showing them what, you should be treated at, like, by those closest to you.
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember when we did about attachment theory and how, our relationship with our parents influences so much of the relationships we have outside of the home, with partners and, friends. So if there is kind of toxic behavior in terms of the relationships in the home, likely you're going to get into a toxic relationship when you grow up. And
And they
that
won't even
really spoke
realize
to
it.
me.
They
You
won't
won't
even
even realize
realize
it's
it.
going to feel normal to you. Oh, is
Mhm.
it, did you get yelled at all the time when you were young and they then told you they loved you? So you might grow up and marry someone who yells at you all the time and then tells you they love you. And you're like, yeah, that seems about normal to me because that's how I was brought up,
And I feel like
you know?
that's another disconnecting pattern we see is for adults who are in these unhealthy relationships, it's
Hmm.
not acceptable. We feel entitled to judge them. But
Hmm.
when I see adults who find themselves in those difficult dynamics, I think about, I wonder what patterns did they learn growing up that allow them to
Yeah.
believe that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's another space of, for me, especially being in the clinical profession of the things that we see, like that observation reminded me, this is why, especially being a mother of both, of a daughter, like I need to show her what a compassionate, healthy relationship looks like,
Yes.
myself and my husband. That way she is less likely to enter into that relationship as an adult.
Absolutely. And what's your I know what your why is, but what's your big vision for this work that you're doing? What would you like to be sort of your lasting legacy in coaching, parent coaching? That's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I'll start off with my daughter, because I
Yeah.
was someone who came to parent coaching because I wanted support. I
Hmm.
needed support because I knew I wasn't the parent that my heart really wanted to be.
Yeah.
That and that's what drew me to this. And what I've gained from it has been so much more presence and so much more joy.
Hmm.
And one of the hardest things about being a parent is how you see someone right there in front of you and they grow and they change and you miss them, but she's right there. And
Yeah.
I know that I can look back when she's an adult and know that I soaked in every single moment, the
Yeah.
good and the bad, with the same type of love that I wish I had growing up.
Yeah.
And that I get to experience the kind of deep connection with my own daughter that I don't have with my parents. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean, like, I love them so much, but the truth is we don't have that quality relationship that I needed growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the legacy, is
Mm-hmm.
really her, that I know that she will always know herself, and not have to reclaim herself into adulthood.
Yeah.
That she'll
Yeah.
have, that I get to nurture her sense of her voice,
Yeah.
like her authenticity, that I get to see what that looks like all throughout life. And she doesn't give
Mm-hmm.
it up for anyone, and she's not even giving it up for me.
Yeah.
I think
That's when you know you're doing a good job.
so that's a big legacy.
Yeah.
That is what drew me to this. What keeps me going, what makes me want to stay connected and help other families,
Mm-hmm.
is knowing that when I help a parent reclaim their journey, the relationships that they get to nurture from then on heals a generation.
Absolutely.
And that it's that intangible experience of
Mm-hmm.
honoring a parent's story
Yes.
that rewards me, is so rewarding. And that's why I keep going. That's why I keep
Yeah.
showing up.
That's right. And it's so true, and it's so needed. I think a lot of mums maybe feel isolated in their journey, and they don't want to say maybe if they're struggling. They just want someone to see them and see value in what they're doing. And, and it goes back to, again, to our children.
Mhm.
There's nothing more powerful than letting a child know that you see them and you see who they are,
Mhm.
and who they are is okay by you, and
Mhm.
nothing they can do can ever change
Mhm.
your unconditional love for them.
Mhm.
And if we raise all our humans, our little humans like that, it's just how incredible the world could be, how incredible the next generation could be. I always say you can't go wrong by leading with love and compassion and empathy. You can't go
Absolutely.
wrong with those things, can you?
Mhm. I love that. It's so true. Just honoring our humanity. Being a parent is a creative and healing process if we give ourselves that permission to see that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And last question for you. Um, do you feel that you have kind of grieved that whole maybe you didn't get what you needed as a child, but are you now, in the way you're parenting your daughter, is that's the way you're going to honor what you've been through, in a way, and kind of grieve that and then let it be in the past as you move forward?
Yes, like definitely throughout this process was grief, because I didn't even understand what I was missing out on,
Yeah. Yeah.
until I gave myself as a parent the space to reflect on my own story.
Yeah.
And also, every time I am present and I practice growing with her, I feel like I heal this little girl inside of me. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
get to gain something out of it
Yeah.
and heal that part of me who has been so disconnected for so long.
Yeah.
And so that is the reward. And with my parents, like, I take what I can. I savor what I can,
Mm-hmm.
and I think another surprising side effect from the from this parent coaching program is, like, how you can learn to let go of resentment when you learn more self-compassion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that very truth that you echoed, that the triggers are really about us,
Mm-hmm.
and giving ourselves the tools to take ownership of our triggers, to take ownership of our feelings, and to learn how to compassionately meet our needs
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
communication.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're amazing. And
I
your
think you're
daughter is
amazing too.
she's so lucky to have a mama like you.
Likewise
You
too,
know?
and I just you are just such a radiant person, and you are glowing,
Oh, thank
literally and figuratively. And so I'm so glad that you're doing this podcast. Like, your voice is one of the kind of voices that will carry through.
Oh, Oh, thank you. And I'm so glad you came on it. You said it earlier, we're going to need 2 parts, and I think we're going to need a part 2. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with Priscilla over on her Instagram, which is Connected Lights Coaching. As always, if no one has told you today, you're doing a great job and I'm proud of you. See you next time.